the money. Say if you have somebody who's been at a company for 5 years and they have a permanent contract with a company for 5 years, and they get a certain amount of money.
Yeah.
What does that compare to with somebody who's been still doing it for 5 years, but is freelance? So who can generally demand more money? Is it better to be a freelancer, or is it better to be somebody in a full-time salary when comparing money?
I would say it's very skill set dependent. So if we take the freelance example, if all you've been doing is cosmetic changes to websites, by cosmetic, I mean moving things around, very visual oriented, then that person versus the permanent person who's been doing a lot more interactive kind of work, dealing with a certain amount of data, manipulating data, and generally being, and bear in mind, if they're in one company, for them to be occupied with work day in, day out, that company must be doing quite in-depth stuff in order to keep that person busy. So that means they're going to narrow down further on whatever their skill set is, versus the freelance person who perhaps, if they're only doing cosmetic changes but across 5 clients every month, well, they're probably doing the same thing over and over and over again. And so they might get very efficient at these basic things, but the problem is they can be quite basic.
Yeah.
And you do risk, I wouldn't say losing skills, but stagnating a little bit. And so that's why your better bet in many respects in technology is to avoid working with companies that are too small and taking on contracts with companies that are doing quite complicated work. Okay, the disadvantage of that is you're bringing yourself slightly back more into the fold of what looks like an employee arrangement, and you are going to have to deal with some of the realities of what you'd have to deal with as an employee. But at the same time, let's remember, these companies are generally very nice to work for. They find it so hard to get developers. They find it a nightmare to just keep the resources they have. They're not going around treating anyone badly. It's not like my days when I worked in Lidl on the tills. There's a big difference in how you're treated, and that is a distinction worth thinking about. But another example would be, so there's a lot of web agencies across the UK, across the world, obviously, but across the UK, and who deal with, let's say, not the Boohoo's of the world, let's say the company's about 20% of the size of Boohoo. There's a lot of agencies who work with them, and this would be kind of like a happy medium. They're doing slightly complicated work, but they're doing slightly complicated work, but it's not as simplistic, not as complicated as Boohoo, but not as simplistic as perhaps the example we gave. Now, if you can get in with one of those companies, just as a contractor, as a freelancer, whatever it might be, that can be quite nice, because you can be doing high enough quality work across multiple different websites that you're keeping your skill level to a good level. But also, those types of companies they're quite likely to come up with an arrangement where they just subcontract all of their work to you. So I've got a client who's in West London, and they're really a marketing agency, but they've got a web arm of their business, and they subcontract probably half of their work to me. And it just, I never have to see them ever. The work's relatively interesting. It's not the most interesting work you'll be doing, but it's not boring either.
Yeah.
And I get the benefit, excuse me, I get the benefit of not having to be in an office somewhere under the eye of some manager, but also I've got quite consistent work. It's an ongoing relationship. It's been on for over a year now. There's no reason why it'll stop. So I guess I'm kind of going off on a tangent there, but it's good, I think, to identify the different options that are available.